We're winding down on our coverage of this year's Sundance Film Festival, but we have a couple more movies left to talk about. What's going on? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our content, we create content like what you are watching right now simply to educate and engage individuals like yourself on mental health awareness and suicide prevention. My name's Capt Nostalgia. I am a writer, podcaster, and event coordinator here with the organization. If you guys would like more information on what we do as a nonprofit, some of our podcasts, movie reviews like this one, and most importantly, our mental health resource library, links are in the descriptions below. Today we're going to be talking about Emily the Criminal, and Emily the Criminal stars Aubrey Plaza as a woman named Emily. Go figure. Emily is an art student who is, like most of people in my generation, suffering with crippling student debt. And so she gets into this illegal racketeering, for lack of a better word, run by Theo Rossi. I don't know how to pronounce that last name, but she gets into a little bit of a the deeper she goes, and the more intense this thriller gets. Honestly, what I really liked about this movie right out the gate is, let's talk about Plaza. Plaza, I feel like, kind of gets this like weird reputation as you're not quite really sure where to place her in terms of tonally. I think people know her best as April Ludgate from Parks and Recreation, and unlike her fellow co-star Chris Pratt, she's not been able to kind of shake that typecasting role. When I talk to people sometimes about Plaza, they don't know her by name. So you go, oh no, it's April from Parks and Rec, and it's like, boom, there's a light bulb that goes off. She has such a commanding presence in this movie, though. Like, I've seen her do everything from comedy to drama, and she's always really good in whatever she's in. She has a wide array of range, but here, not only do they make the character sympathetic and allow Plaza to really just drive that character home and allows the audience to empathize with her, but she's truly terrifying in this movie. The entire climax and third act of this movie is only as draws you to the edge of your seat simply because of Plaza's intensity. That said, this movie reminds me tonally of last year's I Care a Lot. It's taking something that does go on a lot in real life and kind of stuff that people don't like to necessarily acknowledge, or that we're kind of ignorant that really kind of goes on. I'm not going to tell you what it is for this particular movie, just because the less you know, the harder it hits. But this movie already kind of rattled my nerves simply because of just the subject matter of essentially cyber fraud. And dang, I spoiled it. But there's no other way to talk about this movie without talking about the contents therein. And this is kind of like a cutthroat industry, and Plaza at the center of it. Like, dude, she is just scary intense. I would compare her intensity in this movie and her performance to that of Kathy Bates in Misery. If you've seen this movie, you know and understand that comparison, the way that she can be very charismatic in one sense and very just kind of like loosey-goosey, very personable, but then slide into these just intensely terrifying fits of rage. Then on the other hand, you have Rossi. That's how I'm going to pronounce his name moving forward. I've seen him do a lot of things. I think most people probably know him from Luke Cage. He's got a lot of charm in this movie. There's no denying it, and his charm, I feel like, has a good balance against Plaza's intensity, so they really have a great character dynamic moving forward. But that's not to mention that they also have immaculate chemistry. I don't know how else to talk about it. These guys are just intense. They have they have that great dynamic of starting off as employer to an employee, mentor, mentee, kind of becoming romantically involved, and just allowing all of those degrees to really crescendo in the climax to be really effective. And I will say this film's third act does take you in places that you both expect but don't expect at the same time. And while I feel like Rossi and Plaza are both really good in this movie is shot really well, the cinematography is really great, the pacing is pretty stellar as well. This film feels so familiar. And I really feel like sometimes once you kind of get into films that are dealing with these thriller aspects, and I previously compared this film to I Care a Lot, I feel like we've seen this before, and it can't help but feel tiresome and a tad trope-ish. And that's kind of the disappointing factor about this. For as good as there is to praise this movie, it can't help but feel like just run of the mill, very by the numbers, and almost kind of predictable. As much as I love this, as much as I really loved the intensity of the third act, I was predicting character moments as they were happening, and lo and behold, they happened just as predicted because, well, I've seen this movie before. Not this movie exactly, but I've seen others like it. Emily the Criminal ends up being one of those movies, like if you've seen one, you've seen them all kind of thing. And that's very unfortunate because this has probably one of Plaza's best performances that she's ever given. This has one of Rossi's best performances that he's ever given. And it just kind of falls amidst white noise of the genre. Run this through our Rorschach rating scale. This one for me is going to go ahead and get a solid 3 out of 5. Like I said, this film is grounded by Plaza's performance. She is the reason to watch this movie. She wears the titular character title very well, mixing her chemistry with Rossi and also at the same time his performance along with the cinematography, but it can't escape the tropes and just the formulaic plot devices that it leans so heavily into. Now for our mental health moment. Mental health moment is where we essentially will take a theme of mental health and we will analyze it through the film which we are talking about in hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. This is probably one of the most realistic takes on student debt that I've ever seen. Like, I feel like sometimes when we get movies where you have kids that are dealing with student debt, they have the debt, but yet somehow their parents or like a beneficiary is still like paying their bills, so like they're just working to pay off the debt. No, like you feel the intensity with the student debt here, and I just want to speak to a moment for those of us that have student debt. This movie, what I think does so extremely well is it shows the mental health and the desperation of trying to kind of come over the waters of financial debt. And honestly, that's a heavy thing to deal with. That's a heavy thing to always have in your corner, always feel like it's looming in your thing. And I'm not gonna suggest that it's gonna. What I mean to say is that what I'm going to say is probably going to be a little bit easier said than done. I think when it comes to the subject of student debts and the financial estates that come with those, there is a sense of just being overwhelmed, feeling like what you do is never good enough. And I just want to encourage you to take it slow. Like, don't look at the entire sum. Just go speak to a financial officer and maybe even a therapist and kind of work on how to devise a plan to ease that burden and make it feel like it's not so overwhelming. As I previously mentioned, I know what I'm saying is easier said than done, but I just want to encourage you and understand that you're not alone. I mean, student debt is something that is kind of affecting my generation more than any other generation before it. And I mean, to a degree, there are generations that have come out, but it seems like this generation is hit the hardest. And that debt and that entire thing just it just feels and weighs so heavy. So never neglect to talk to someone. We don't always have the answers, and we're not always going to know how to deal with such copious debt, or the mind of the mental health of never feeling like what you're doing is never good enough or never enough. Take it slow. Consider other resources in our descriptions below, and I would advise to, my encouragement is from this video is that you would seek out either a therapist or a financial planner to kind of ease the burden and kind of to redirect your mental health and kind of give you peace of mind. With that said, make sure that you guys keep checking back as of this keep checking back for our Sundance coverage. As of this video, there is still no release date for Emily the Criminal, but have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching.